Welcome to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show on Podcast One, broadcasting live from Mordor, the Borg Cube, and Voldemort's lair all at the same time. This show is hosted by Milo Yiannopoulos, the most fabulous supervillain on the internet. Sorry, no offense, but it's true. The Milo Yiannopoulos Show is brought to you by Breitbart.com.
Welcome to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show. I'm here with Tom Cicotto, who is normally my producer, but I have... what have I done? I've elevated you to the role of co-host this week, so say hello.
What's going on, everybody?
I have a couple of things I'd like to talk to you about before we get into the interview this week, because occasionally, depending on my whimsy, effectively, I sometimes like to regale listeners with my opinions about the news stories this week that have been interesting. So I noticed a couple of things. First of all, we should talk about what happened at The Triggering, which was a talk that I did with Christina Hoff Sommers and Stephen Crowder at UMass Amherst. And it gave birth to perhaps the most extraordinary creation of the internet since Big Red. Do you know what Big Red is? Are you old enough to know what that is? Are you around on the internet for Big Red?
Oh, I know Big Red. That was a while. That was a couple years ago, though, wasn't it? The weird-lipped, red-haired lady. Yeah. Yeah.
So she's this Canadian woman who's yelling in the street about, she's reading this sort of like 10-point definition of the patriarchy or something, and you said, the systematic oppression of women is an example of patriarchy. I'm talking. She was amazing because she was sort of like the perfect example of what an insane, red-haired, angry-looking, lesbianic, overweight, over-angry feminist is supposed to look like. But I've got a feeling that she might be about to lose her crown to Jigglypuff. What do you think?
I mean, but people were speculating this week that this is going to be the new one. I was like, it's a bit early. But this is crazy. When you compare the two, this is just too perfect. It seems fake. It doesn't even seem real. When you watch this back.
Sorry, if you can hear swallowing sounds, it's because I'm in a hotel in Los Angeles at 10:30 p.m. chugging back red wine. I like to share with my listeners, the special intimate moments that they are welcomed into in my life when they listen to this podcast. These are the things that we share together. No, so I'm not with Tom, by the way. Tom is down the line. I am, of course, reclining, semi-naked, drunk in a very nice hotel in Beverly Hills, but Tom is somewhere entirely. Where are you? You're in Pennsylvania.
I'm in wonderful Lewisburg, Pennsylvania.
Just make it completely clear so we don't get letters. Are you underage? Who knows?
I'm not underage. I work for Breitbart.
You have a very youthful voice. People might wonder. They might worry. Anyway, so Trigglypuff is the name given to this wonderful student who, by now, I'm sure every listener of this show will have seen the footage of her throwing her arms up and down. Do you know what's amazing about it? And I've said this a couple of times before, so sorry for those listeners who've heard this already, but there's an order of events to that video which I find fascinating. So she starts by taking an enormous intake of breath. Like her body knows that there's no way she'll get through this much exercise without, a massive injection of oxygen. She does this huge intake. And then she hurls her arms up into the air and yells, "Get your hate speech off this campus," 3 times whilst thrusting her arms backwards and forwards. And just, it's what in less politically correct times we'd refer to as spurging out. Just losing it. And then it's like she's been switched off. Suddenly she just stops. The arms come back down. I don't know if you those terrible Star Wars movies, the Attack of the Clones, the drone, whatever it is. When they turn all the robots off and they all just go, the clone army gets switched off.
Have you seen the one where it's her doing it and it's her energy level decreases as she heads towards have you seen that one online?
Yeah, you know what they did? It's like a Street Fighter thing. So she's got this like bar of rage and it gets used up as she's going through this incredible protest like you've never heard, you've never seen in your life. And then eventually she's just it's the funniest thing and I love it and it's absolutely great. But she has friends. She has friends that presumably feel sorry for her and who are very supportive of her body positivity. This is what we have to call fat people who aren't ashamed of it. Fat people who aren't sorry about the fact that they're gigantic, quivering mounds of flesh, unlovable ham beasts. we now have to say that they're body positive, which is a sort of horrible sociopathic system of lying. It's like an anti-health cult. It's something that social justice warriors and feminists do to vulnerable young girls, telling them that they can look how they want and behave how they want, and they'll still be happy and somebody will still love them, which is, of course, a lie. It is a sociopathic lie that we tell these young people, condemning them to a life of misery and solitude. Anyway, so she's one of these, and she's got friends. And one of these friends, finally getting around to the news bit of this, one of these friends demanded that a student journalist should be punished for daring to film a protester at a public event. I mean, these people show up. This is the essence of the cry bully. This is the essence of the social justice warrior who is at once aggressor and victim. What I used to call quantum superstate feminism. She shows up to cause a fuss at a public event in a room where there are 500 smartphones, and then they cry foul when one of them embarrasses themselves. It's absolutely amazing. Did you write this story up? I think it was you, wasn't it?
Yeah, I did write this story. Can I ask you, it was hard to tell from the stream, did you have any idea this was going on during the event, or is it something you didn't hear about until after?
Well, you know, I've got a sort of secret weapon against the social justice warriors, and it's called myopia. I've got really bad eyesight. So I don't wear my contact lenses on stage. I don't wear glasses on stage, and I just get on with my talk. And very often, I don't really know what's happening. So at Rutgers, I've never told anybody this. I've never told anyone this. I had no idea those girls were smearing blood on their faces until they'd already left the room, and somebody told me at Rutgers because I couldn't see them.
You had no idea that was happening?
No, I didn't know until afterwards. I had no idea. And people are always like, "Oh, the camera always cuts to you," and you're like smirking. You're like so smug. This is exactly what you came for. This is exactly. I'm literally. I know there's a commotion. I can see people standing. I'm like, "Oh, she looks red in the face," but I didn't know they were smearing paint on themselves until after they'd left, and somebody told me. So no, I didn't know that she was. I mean, I could hear her, but I couldn't see her, which is amazing given her girth. And the fact that I'm sorry, Tom is a much nicer person than I am. He's just sitting in horror in the background. But no, I couldn't see her. I could hear her. I could hear the screams and the yells and the shrieks. I could tell she was obviously in distress, but I couldn't see her. And so anyway, so she got very upset, and her friend has demanded that the student journalist be disciplined. The person who made the complaint is called Jenny Chenkin, and she, she wants to sue blogs for quoting her on Facebook. She hasn't threatened Breitbart yet, but, it's just absolutely amazing. I think it's a perfect example, isn't it, of the cry bully instinct.
Well, I think the craziest thing is that I think her main demand is that this student journalist never be published again, whether it be in Campus Reform or her university's like student publication. She wants her out of journalism forever. That's her demand.
It's amazing, and they don't appreciate at all the iron. Well, they just don't understand how Orwellian and horrific that is. If, by the way, you're distressed by crackling in the background, I feel I should explain. I've recently rediscovered Skittles sours. And I'm crackling because I'm trying to get all of the yellow and the green ones out because they're the best ones. You like those ones best, right?
I love sour Skittles. They're better than regular Skittles.
They are better than regular Skittles, but what color do you like?
Oh, I don't know. They all taste the same.
No, they don't. They don't taste the same.
Do.
No, because the zingy, citrusy, really sharp, lemony ones, the yellow, green, and orange are the best. Because the other ones are too much like berries.
I bet you if you closed your eyes right now, you put them in your mouth,
literally
you have no
done
idea.
that. I've literally, I look, because I'm very good at like tasting and smelling and all the rest of it. I've got very good sharp senses. And I do blind taste tests on myself all the time. I do it with mayonnaise to see if I can tell the expensive mayonnaise from the cheap mayonnaise. I do it with sweets. I do it with everything. I'm about to take an enormous mouthful of these things. Let's see.
All right, a couple of weeks we're going to do it. We'll see if you can do it.
Oh my God, it's so disgusting. Why do people eat this stuff? Oh my God, it's horrible. My body is telling me that this is something that should not be in my mouth.
They're good though. It's
Not
like it's a weird thing.
Let's move on. There's a story that you told me about a conservative professor who is suing a Catholic university. Tell me about this.
Yeah, this is a new thing. That's apparently this professor, Dr. John McAdams, wrote a blog post which was critical of another one of his colleagues who told students that they couldn't even engage in a discussion about the legalization of gay marriage, that whole court battle. This was back before gay marriage was legalized. He was criticizing this professor that said it was homophobic to challenge the idea that gay marriage should be legalized. So he was suspended without pay. He'll be suspended without pay until January 2017. And the university, which is Marquette, which is a Catholic university, worth saying, is kind of laughing off this lawsuit that he's bringing against them. He believes that they violated his right to academic freedom, but it doesn't look like it's going to end well for him based on what I'm reading.
You know, it's interesting. I'm seeing a lot of people, a lot of the sort of social justice issues on, you know, whether it's, you know, whether you are pro the feminist side or you're anti the gay marriage or whatever. A lot of people are getting very serious now. Now it's become a national talking point. People are getting serious about it. And someone just emailed me and said that they've published a piece in a law review. Let me find it for you. I think you'll like it. Yeah, in the Indiana Law Review. And it's about racial affirmative action policies and how they may violate the 14th Amendment. I think we're going to see some interesting legal developments over the next couple of years, depending on who's president next. You know, if we get Title IX repealed, all sorts of people are getting very serious about social justice in college. And, I mean, I'm fascinated about this. Having to sue a university for violating your academic freedom is the sort of thing could only really happen in 2016, isn't it?
I came to college very naive. I knew that this stuff kind of existed, but it's real. I mean, there are professors, when I had you here at Bucknell University, who told students directly, don't go see Milo. I mean, you tell a college student not to do something, the only thing they want to do is do it, you know?
Don't go. It's the stupidity of it, the sort of fundamental misunderstanding of basic human psychology, which has given rise to Donald Trump and perhaps to me, and just to the mischief and the sort of the dissident Trumpy element on campus.
I mean, it goes beyond that. They don't even realize they're shooting themselves in the foot, but it goes beyond that, and then they're impeding upon what the function of the university should be. And it should be this open marketplace for ideas, free expression, challenging each other. It's just not that. At this point in time, it's not that. And I kind of feel bad that I'm not getting that experience. You don't even have to be in college. You can read about it on the internet. It's happening everywhere.
Well, you've been very brave on this subject, and you've written things that your professors haven't been very happy with, and Breitbart was so happy with them and gave you a job. But I think you've been very brave on this subject. You've been one, I think, of the loudest voices in the current generation of students. I'm trying. Well, and it seems to me all you're really doing is asking the faculty, asking your professors, asking the college administrators to give you a well-rounded education. You know, just to say, guys, please, like, I'd like to hear other points of view, and maybe don't punish me if I don't share your opinions on things. It's extraordinary that you have to do this, but of course, I think anyone who's been following what we're doing at Breitbart, or, you know, reading my columns or whatever, will be familiar now with the sort of Orwellian groupthink that has taken hold on American campuses for the last 30 years. Let's talk about two slightly different subjects, and then I'm going to say goodbye to you. We're going to get into our big interview this week. But I wanted to talk to you first of all about a story that our colleague, I think it was Alan Bukhari, ran this story about Google searches for the Libertarian Party have surged after Trump's win. What does this mean?
What is it? Are you asking me?
I am. I mean, is this Republicans who just can't stomach daddy, and they're like, okay, what else is out there? I've heard of this libertarian thing.
Well, can I be the Gary Johnson authority? Can that be my role? I did get to meet him a couple months ago.
Did you?
I don't think he's perfect. I like him.
They keep asking me to put him on the podcast, I think, and we don't reply because libertarians yawn. But
well, I don't know if I'm going against the grain here, but I don't think it's necessarily Trump's policies per se, but the way Gary Johnson put it to me when I interviewed him was that he finds Trump and Clinton to be the two most polarizing figures in American politics, and he views himself as perhaps an appealing alternative to those two. That's where he sees his place.
I see. Well, I think you will quickly see, I think, most voters returning to the two big parties, because there's such a huge battle for America's soul about to take off. And we might dedicate a whole podcast next week to talking about Trump versus Hillary, because it's so interesting and exciting. I'm going to try and get something interesting on to talk about it. Last news story, and then we will go to break. Sports Illustrated. Tell us, as a young red-blooded male, what do you, before we get into the story, what do you think of when you hear the phrase Sports Illustrated? What does that say to you?
I've been a long-time Sports Illustrated subscriber. I used to get it in the mail every week.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And how does young Ms. Sakata feel about this?
Oh, my mother?
No.
I didn't get the swimsuit edition. We didn't get this. I just.
Oh,
got
there
the
are different
sports-
editions. I don't know this because we don't have this in Europe. So Sports Illustrated is a very... Oh, I didn't even know this. So Sports Illustrated, perfectly respectable magazine about sports, but there's a swimsuit edition of it which has a bit more totty, right?
The swimsuit edition comes out once a year, and that's I didn't get to. I didn't. That came to the house and it quickly disappeared. I never got to see it.
Did your father... He's going to listen to this. He's going to be very mad with me for asking, but...
It did end up in his office sometimes. That's all I'm saying.
Wow. You really, you just threw your dad straight under the bus with that one.
You asked.
Somebody's going to be finding his own tuition fees next semester. Good Lord.
No,
dear.
Okay, so the question is, back to the question, is it appropriate for Caitlyn Jenner to go full nude on the cover of Sports Illustrated?
God, full tit and minge. What? So, Caitlyn, formerly Bruce, who knows, is doing the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition. Do you know? I know people want me to be a bigot about this, or want me to be sort of skeptical, and want me to do the family values thing, and want me to be, respectable and grown up about this. But you know what? I'm so amused by the fury and confusion of the trans lobby when every single one of their icons turns out to be addicted to very traditional gender norms and very, very like classic feminine dress and style. Because all the trans lobby, what they want, all these people, is a sort of gender queer, sexually ambiguous ideal, which is it's a sort of soulless, banal reimagining of what they probably think the 70s was like. And the 70s was actually, well, I wasn't there, but, you think about people like Bowie and Mick Jagger and whatever, incredibly sexually charged, but slightly sexually ambiguous titans in pop music. Whereas now you have, fat, dumpy, blue-haired lesbians, then you can't tell if it's a man or a woman. It's quite a different thing. But the trans lobby, it seems to me, that certainly don't speak for all trans people, and indeed all of the trannies I know can't fucking stand them. But the trans lobby seems to be into this sort of weird, anodyne, sexless, blank-faced, genderqueer sexual ideal. But their spokespeople, the people they put in the magazine, whether it's Laverne Cox in a very traditional, figure-hugging, voluptuous, sassy black girl dress on the cover of Time, or Caitlyn Jenner, who of course appeared in Vanity Fair looking every inch the, old Hollywood sort of starlet in her twilight years, and is now doing, possibly is there anything that social justice warriors hate more than the swimsuit edition of Sports Illustrated? Really? Could there be any more classic embodiment of all of the things they loathe about, macho, heteronormative, heterosexual culture? No. Caitlyn Jenner keeps sort of stubbornly resisting their entreaties to be some kind of freakish alien genderqueer figure. So I kind of like it. Look, and if somebody manages against all odds to crack one out to Caitlyn Jenner, then good on them. Good on them. Good for you, sir.
Not only does Caitlyn Jenner appear more traditional in her magazine covers, whatever, she was a Cruz supporter and then recently said that Trump would be a good president. So I think the trans lobby has written Caitlyn Jenner off altogether.
They don't like her, do they?
I don't think they do.
I think we should try and get on the show because I think I need to repent, and I need to come back into the Jenner fold, and I need to put her back into the pantheon of Jenners, Kardashians, and whatever. I love the rest of the family, so I think we need to welcome her home, and I need to have a chat with her. So we're going to try and get her on the show in a future episode. All right, I think that's all the news that we can cope with, unless there's anything else you want to bring up this week.
Not that I could think of. Hopefully you'll have me back. Hopefully I can come back on again and not just be behind the scenes.
No, you've been lovely. So Tom, this has been Tom Sakata, who's my producer, who is responsible for getting me to the right place at the right time with a camera and with microphone equipment plugged in, logged on to. You have no idea the extent of horrors that he has to go through just to get me in the right place. Just to get me in one place at the allotted time successfully, on the internet. If you're ever wondering how on earth it is that a crazy hot mess like me manages to actually put a show out every week, Tom is the answer. And he's also very interesting and clever. And I think one of the leading voices of his generation on campuses, issuing entreaties to college administrators to provide a more well-rounded education. So thank you very much for joining us, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to go to break, and when we come back, I'll be speaking to Jack Donovan, who is possibly the only other respectable, acceptable homosexual in American public life. He's a writer on masculinity and men's issues, and improbably for somebody who is right about almost everything, another homosexual. We'll be back after these messages. Making an impression is all about contrasts. Listen to gangster rap in the afternoon and Wagner in the evening. Wear Louis Vuitton but smoke Newports. Lunch at Claridge's but dine at KFC. Why spend tens of thousands on a fancy car when you can make just as much of an impression stepping out of a used Toyota in Gucci sunglasses and a three-piece Savile Row suit? I'm not entirely sure this is true, actually. You can get out of a used Toyota in Gucci sunglasses and a three-piece suit and create the same impression as stepping outside of a Maybach. But you know what? Let's go with it. With TrueCar, you can connect with a local certified dealer of your choosing, so you can lock in guaranteed savings off the MSRP. I have no idea what that is. I guess you do. And enjoy a better buying experience. TrueCar customers are more likely to enjoy a faster buying process when they connect with TrueCar certified dealers. Over 2 million cars have been sold to TrueCar users by the TrueCar certified dealer network, and there are over 11,000 TrueCar certified dealers nationwide. You will work directly with the TrueCar certified dealer, and TrueCar users save an average of $3,279 off the... Oh, I know, it's manufacturer's suggested retail price. There we go. So I'm basically like an old person who's forgot. This is Tom, my producer in the background, who is back as a special cameo appearance to snigger at me while I attempt to get through the ad break. Thank you for that, Tom. Using the TrueCar website or the TrueCar app, you can easily find the car you want. So when you're ready to buy a new or a used car, visit TrueCar.com or download the TrueCar app to enjoy a better car buying experience. Some features are not available in all states. I have been Milo Yiannopoulos. Thank you for listening. It's the podcast with political analysis as rigorous as my daily hair care routine. Welcome back to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show on Podcast One. Welcome back to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show. I'm very excited by this week's guest, who is, I think, the only other based homosexual on the internet and in the media today, commentating, writing books. Jack Donovan is an American author who writes very influentially and interestingly about masculinity and culture, writes about feminism and gay culture. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I think you're basically the only other, the way that we would put it on the internet, and if this does offend people at home, good. The way that we put it on the internet is you are the only other based faggot. You're the only other homosexual who isn't a total fucking Mary. I've read all of your books. I'm looking forward to reading the upcoming one, which we'll talk about later. Now, you I know you don't like to sort of bang on about this too much, but you are a gay man who writes very intelligently and brilliantly about masculinity and about a lot of the sort of ways in which it has been undermined and it is in danger. I try to do some of the same things on college campuses when I talk about free speech and how feminists are lying about the wage gap and campus rape culture, all this kind of stuff. I'm going to jump straight in. Why is it taking two fags, one from Britain and one from America, to save men? Why has it been left to us?
Well, because there are no consequences. In many cases, a lot of guys who I talk to, because most of my readers are straight men, and I rather prefer it that way. The thing is, I'll never have to answer to my wife.
Answer to a kind of wife, but not anybody that actually cares about the wage gap.
Right. I'm never going to have to answer to, a woman, or, I don't have to mince my words very carefully. I don't have to worry about what somebody's going to say. I can just kind of say whatever I want. And also, a lot of the most masculine guys that I know, they have a problem articulating their ideas about masculinity. It's not that they don't think about it, because they absolutely do, but I think they have a problem articulating it. Coming from this perspective, I kind of had to take it apart and put it back together again in my mid-30s to understand it better. And I think because I had to do that, I have kind of a fresh perspective, and I can see something. I was telling somebody the other day, masculinity is kind of like what they say about privilege. You can't see it because it's all around you. For a lot of these guys, masculinity is part of their life, so they can't see it in its most basic form. So it's hard for them to talk about it. The other thing is that there's a lot of danger, I think, in talking about masculinity. As a man, when you talk about it in the positive, people automatically judge your own masculinity. and I get this all the time. Like, well, he's not that. He's clearly not that big of a badass. He shouldn't be telling us about masculinity, and that kind of misses the point because we're just talking about theory. But a lot of guys don't want to be put under that kind of pressure.
Let's get into the specifics. What do you think's gone wrong? What do you think? From my point of view, I see a lot of messages being sent to both women and men that seem almost designed to drive the sexes apart. They seem designed to make people miserable, to turn men into something weird, to turn women into something weird. I mean, we're constantly told by feminists that women can be fat and ugly and burp and fart and shit everywhere. That's clearly not true. We're constantly told, by feminists that men can be these namby-pamby mincing queens and that metrosexuality is what women want, but it clearly isn't. Another example of women sort of constantly asking for things they don't really want. But give me your view on what are the three things that have really gone wrong for men in America?
For men in America, I think that one of the things that's going wrong is obviously they've bought into a feminist agenda in the sense that they've been told, as I think you and I have both seen, that if they're nice to women and they bring the flowers and they do exactly what they're told, then women are going to love them for it. And as you said, women often don't want exactly what they say they want. They're not going to tell some guy to come boss them around, but sometimes when that happens, relationships work out a little bit better. So men have been kind of convinced by predominantly female teachers, I think. I mean, they grow up with almost only female influences. They have this influence in their life and they try to please that person all the time. And so they kind of go out in the world and do that. And that creates confusing relationships for them. And also, obviously the system, in the sense that there are no male spaces in the world, there are very few places that you can go where it's only men. And I think men need that kind of experience with just men around to really find themselves and really understand who they are and really access their own identity. I think when you have women kind of run an interference pattern and kind of turn men against each other. And
it's true that a lot of those spaces, I mean, there are two pressures on this, aren't there? There's social pressure and economic pressure on men.
Yes.
And this does sort of, does play itself out in male-only spaces. I mean, the economic pressures on, let's say, the local pub in Europe has meant that, that these places are starting to collapse and evaporate. And then there are social pressures on male-only clubs that are forcing them to open up to women and things. And it's all perfectly well for women to have spaces they can hang out on their own. But it seems like the only place that a man can go these days is maybe a gym, but then only the locker room. And there's a lot of both of these economic and social pressures on men to constantly be around women and to constantly be behaving as they have to behave in front of women and not really be able to enjoy each other's company. I find this whole thing very weird. I suppose you're right that we can talk about this because there are no consequences for us, but I wonder whether also we have a sort of typical, classic outsider's perspective on this because we don't have a dog in the fight. We're able to take a bit more objectivity and occasionally turn around to women and say, you are being absolutely insane. I also think that gay people have a natural, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily come across as a homosexual. You're quite a beefy, masculine, sort of straight-acting kind of guy. People occasionally pick up that I'm gay, if you can believe that. And they occasionally do. But for me, part of the fun thing about having this sort of gadflyish ability to sort of sit on the edge and comment on what's going on. Not only do we have a bit more of an objective authority, we tend to be listened to because it's weird for a gay person to talk about this, but we also can take a sort of sense of ironic detachment about it all. Now, one of the things that interests me is how gay people are running and screaming in terror in some cases away from progressive politics. And progressive politics, is the root of many of the feminist evils that you and I both dislike so much. But the last election in the UK, 50% of gay men told survey takers, I think it was YouGov, to The Guardian, that they were thinking of voting Conservative. And The Guardian reported this with sort of horror and consternation because they didn't really understand what was going on. Now, my view is that gay people are natural libertarians, so we're good allies in the fight against sort of big government nannying, pole-clutching kind of, people controlling feminist influences anyway. But I've noticed quite a significant move of gays towards the right and towards the libertarian. I've also noticed a move among some gay people I know towards the alt-right. I want to talk to you a little bit about the alt-right. Do you consider yourself an alt-righter? You are, aren't you?
I've been part of those circles, yeah.
I suppose I would want to ask you about the alt-right seems to share, it's almost camp in a way, it shares some characteristics with gay culture because it is so brazen and provocative, and it has that sort of Trump-esque don't back down, double down kind of atmosphere and character to it. I mean, you've sort of been in those circles for a while. A lot of them idolize you, despite what the left-wing media says about them all being homophobes and racist and all the rest of it. I mean, they seem to like both of us perfectly well. Because you, in your books, have a quite close, highly developed sense of the heroic, and that seems to be a big theme in the alt-right. How have you felt? Just tell me a little bit about it, and a little bit about your journey through the alt-right, who you hang out with, what you like about it, what it sort of means to you. Give me a little sense of where you sit on that spectrum.
Well, I was following the alt-right, as Richard Spencer was kind of coining the name for it and putting it together, and I was writing about men's issues at the time anyway for some men's rights activists and so forth, because it's a scary thing. You can talk about feminism, and then these guys, you talk about like gay rights and stuff like that, and then you hear about these guys who've had SWAT teams come and take their kids away. That's a whole different level of heavy.
Yeah.
And that really spoke to me, and so I started writing about those subjects. And then Richard contacted me to write for Alternative Right in its first incarnation, and I wrote about men's issues for them. For a little bit anyway, because there's kind of a push and pull back and forth in the alt-right between Christians and people who just don't care. The Christians obviously threw a little bit of a tantrum, I think, at the time. and then eventually it didn't matter, and then maybe now it does again. I don't know. I don't really care anymore. One thing that I think Richard brought to the table that really made him stand out in terms of the alt-right versus old school conservatism was the understanding that style was important, that visuals were important, that you had to actually keep up with modern technology and address the media kind of where it is, rather than I think a lot of these old conservative sites were, they finally got on the internet and they had these like just wordy, boring websites. And, they're just these old crackpots sitting around grumping about minorities moving into their neighborhoods. The first meeting of this kind of thing that I went to, was more like old school conservative, and a buddy of mine took me because he thought it would be hilarious because no one really knew who I was or anything. And so I went along, and everyone there was like the Depends crowd, like everyone there was like, probably needed a nurse. And,
I just got that.
yeah.
Sorry, no, I understand. Yeah, okay. We have a similar joke in England okay, fine. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah. So, but then, in just a few years, as the alt-right has moved forward, you've seen a lot more younger guys who are interested in it. If you're talking about something like European culture, I mean, that's a romantic vision. And so it's attached to art. It's attached to culture. And it's this romantic vision of what European culture has brought to the world, and what we see in many cases, is disappearing in terms of kind of a vulgar, commercially based culture that we have now.
Let me ask you about that. Because you wrote in The Way of Men, which is my favorite of your books. You wrote, it's tragic to think that heroic man's great destiny is to become economic man, that men will be reduced to craven creatures who crawl across the globe competing for money. That's a big departure, and it's possibly the defining departure of the alt-right from mainstream conservative politics, which worships the free market. Those establishment conservatives might, in theory, in some circumstances, be happy tearing down some old deconsecrated cathedral to build a shopping mall if they felt that the economic incentives were there. Now, the people we call natural conservatives, so the people I think you're talking about, would be horrified by that. And it sounds like you would be too, because you care about ththese cultural issues in the way that alt-right really does, and the way that mainstream establishment conservatism does not. I suppose... what I want to ask you is why this is happening now. And do you think, I sometimes say that this election is the first election that's going to be fought culturally, and that Donald Trump is the first cultural candidate for president, at least since Pat Buchanan, and that he's winning with people who don't necessarily care too much about the primacy, the supremacy, the inviolability of the free market, but who instead want to preserve Western culture. Do you think that's true? Do you think that for a lot of men now, because of the economic pressures on them, because they see women sort of swamping education in the workplace, they, in a sense, they're almost retreating into culture? Not that that's, it is the most important thing, of course, but is that what you see happening? Do you think that's why the Trump phenomenon is happening, why the alt-right is blossoming? Men are sort of retreating back into Western culture and rediscovering its glories and its majesties and sticking up for it again in a way that perhaps conservatives haven't for a couple of decades.
Well, I don't know how much that has to do with Trump. I do think that men are kind of realizing that something's been lost. And, the excitement of the future, that you had kind of through the 20th century, everything about the future was fantastic. And we're here. And, it's just, reality television and Snapchat and so forth. And it's not really all that fantastic. And what we're getting in place of kind of these, like you said, cathedrals and these beautiful things that have taken a lot of time, or these kind of ugly buildings and so forth that, they just really have no soul.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of men see that. And then as far as Trump is concerned, I feel like that's more of an issue of a lot of what we see when we see like feminism talking to men and all this political correctness is that people have I really feel like the left has jumped the shark, a long time ago, really. They went way over the edge and everything has become so ridiculous that people are actually just sick of it.
It's interesting.
And so I think the Trump thing is more just like a response to that.
So you see him as mainly a reaction to, it's interesting that feminists, everyone tells us that women are interested in feelings, in communication, all the rest of it. It's feminism really that's made the relationship between men and women understood in sort of mercantile monetary fashion. I mean, they're obsessed with the wage gap. And it's babyish, dumb economics that doesn't stand up to the slightest bit of scrutiny. It isn't true. But there's a sense that they kind of bought into the free market capitalism vision of the world where people's value is tied to what they take home in their wage packet. And they're fighting on those grounds. It's almost like they've conceded that that's the most important thing, and that people should be valued by how much they take home. And they don't care so much about, happiness and culture and the richness and complexity of interpersonal relationships. Because, of course, if they did, they wouldn't say any of the things they do. It's weird in there. So in a sense, I suppose what I see happening with the sort of men's rights movement and all its various forms and the alt-right and whatever is this sort of rejection of money as the primary way we value ourselves. And it always surprises people who don't know when they look at, let's say, Rush V's blog, and he has some interesting thoughts about corporatism and men being slaves to corporations. It always takes people aback a little. It surprises them that the alt-right isn't some sort of, red-blooded capitalist, but they're really not. You're not at all, are you?
No. I mean, that's the progressive narrative, though. I mean, the narrative is that, the right is for people who only like money, and the left is for people who care about people. And that's what they sell, and that's why they make it easy to hate each other. Like the left will always talk about the Koch brothers or whatever, as if they don't have their own corporate
But there's been
sponsors.
an inversion in the last 10, 20 years, hasn't there? Because now the most exciting, vibrant, fast-growing, young bit of the right libertarian world don't particularly like some of the products of capitalism.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's definitely the case, but only in the fast-moving, exciting parts, as you said. The mainstream right still, if you turn on your Rush Limbaugh or whatever, they still worship the free market and so forth. But that's in many ways, that's why they're losing. They still appeal to that business only kind of mentality. That's why I think the conservatives can't really pull it together in many cases.
I want to ask you a bit more about the alt-right before we go to break. When we talk about Western culture, now, for most of the people in the alt-right that I've spoken to, they say that has a racial dimension. They say that cultures of particular places are tied up with the tribes and races and whatever who live in those places. And that's why some of them support Trump, they want the wall built. Some of them are against immigration. Many of them are worried about, if not only radical Islamism, but Islam. When you talk about preserving Western culture, what precisely do you mean?
Well, for me personally, I'm kind of outside the alt-right in the sense that I'm more interested in creating new culture at this point. I don't feel like you can constantly save something that in many ways has already died. As far as the alt-right concerned, I think that they are more concerned with preserving Western culture. And I think that there are so many little segments of that community that, there are total people, the racial soul of the people must be preserved. Like crazy kind of.
We call them the 1488ers. The people who are really out there on this.
And there are all different versions of that kind of permeate up through. But I think that the heart of the alt-right, there's kind of a group of a few hundred really smart guys that I've met in person. And I think, they're more interested in, obviously they're white in many cases. They're white and they understand that actually there is such a thing as being white, which is a big problem on the left, is not being able to admit that.
Not just that there's such a thing, but that there is nothing intrinsically wrong with it.
Yeah, I mean they're white and they understand that they're going to be minorities, and why the left has always said that being a minority sucks, and we're about to experience what that's like, only being a hated minority.
Open season on us.
Yeah. So it's. I mean, I think a lot of smart guys who are actually successful and understand the world understand that that's what's coming. Yes. And I think that in many ways they are concerned about what happens to white people. That's not necessarily about hating other groups of people.
Well, that doesn't strike me as racism. It strikes me as simply what the left has done and what other races and other cultures are encouraged to do for themselves, whether it's in Black Lives Matter or the Muslim world or whatever. There seems to be an exception made for white people. We're not allowed to do any of those things. And when we do them, we are ridiculed and pilloried and criticized, and labels are slapped on us like racist from, in many cases, distressingly other white people, as some sort of bizarre kind of brain disease that these coastal Vox bloggers seem to have. All right. Well, we're going to go to break. Before we do that, I just want to ask you, I mean, we talked a little bit about the sort of global capitalism and sort of this, I mean, I think what some of the alt-right is reacting to would be the late capitalistic intricate symbiosis between the banks, the politicians, the big media, and all the rest of it, and they're reacting against that and returning, because of their love of culture and their love of people, to a more sort of communitarian and tribal understanding of themselves and understanding of other people. And I just want, before we go to break, to for you to just give us a brief summary of what your new book is about, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit more when we come back. Give us a brief suggestion. My understanding is that it's a book about tribalism and how men can come to understand themselves as part of a group or society or a tribe, and rather than this sort of weird, this sort of very overwhelming and disorientating globalized capitalist universe that we live in now. So you want people to return to tribes. What do you mean by that? And what's the central crux of the book? And then we'll come back to it after the break.
Well, the book is called Becoming a Barbarian. And
I love that.
Basically, at the end of The Way of Men, I basically told men that to go out and start a gang, or to go out and start a tribe, or become part of something, become part of a group, because men actually have a more important role in a smaller system. We farm out all of our big jobs for men, the jobs that men have always done, the hunting and protecting and so forth. We farm those out to a very small group of people. And in a smaller society, more men have the opportunity to do those jobs and kind of have a sense of purpose in life and feel more involved. And so, I talked to men about tribalism and so forth. And what I found is that many of them were still thinking in this kind of, they had this kind of global consciousness. And, the new book is about taking that apart, because you can't become part of a tribe as long as you're still trying to make everyone in the world happy.
Jack, you just told me briefly about your new book, and I'd like to dive into this a little bit more deeply. So you talk about men, in your view, should go out and become part of tribes, become part of something. Can you sort of expand on that? Help me understand what that means in reality, in concrete terms. If somebody's reading your book, I don't know, they work at Walmart and they're unhappy with their lives. They think that they're kind of a slave to this big capitalist system. They can't find a girl they like because women have been brainwashed into feminism and thinking they can all be over-demanding ham beasts. What does he do? How does he fix his life? When you say he should go and join a tribe, what do you mean? What is he looking for, and what advice are you giving him in this book?
Well, when I say tribe, what I mean is a group of people with a shared fate and who are also interdependent. And, that's the only alternative I see. I mean, I have a lot of gun guys and knife guys and a lot of guys who kind of fantasize about the day when the government is going to come and so forth. And in all reality, the government has drones and Apache helicopters. You're not going to go to war. This isn't 1776.
Do you occasionally come into contact with these? I mean, this is like the American dream for me as a Brit. I come over and I sort of thinking about these huddles of men in the mountains in Montana, just sort of, like when the sheriff comes, you better back down and leave us alone. It all sounds a bit kooky, but very heroic and exciting. Just tell me. I want you to carry on and just sort of tell me what you envisage for a sort of better model of society. From where we are now, people stuck in jobs they don't like and with lives they don't like very much, and nobody has much of an idea of where they or the local community is going. Everybody seems to be working on behalf of somebody else. Help us through the practicalities of this.
Right. Well, like I said, we're not going to rise up. The South isn't going to rise again. And,
Glad to hear that.
So, I mean, as far as I know, anyway, I mean, but
I see these memes on Twitter, and I think they're joking. I have to tell you, I won't tell you which show. Sorry to drop you again, but I won't tell you which show it was. But a good friend of mine has this. He jailbroke his iPhone to replace the Sprint with South Will Rise, and then got this screen, and then put something on this. I mean, it was just trolling, but it was funny. Put something on the screen he thought would be interesting, and it ended up showing up on loads of news programs I didn't even notice. But he'll know who I mean. Anyway, as a Brit, of course, I have no idea what this expression even means, so you should carry on.
Right. The sense is that obviously the government is completely overreaching. It continues to get bigger and bigger, and I don't really think there's a political end to that. The government getting bigger, it's a system that kind of preserves itself, as all corporations do. What they're designed to do is grow. So I don't think there's a political end to that. So I think the only way to really change that is to just undermine their narrative, to not worry about depending on the government for a bunch of things, and start finding actual friends. A lot of people don't even have very many people who would loan them $100. I think it's important to build actual tight networks of people who you can depend on in an emergency. Because everybody's kind of figuring, oh, well, we pay our taxes to the police, we pay our taxes to the government, someone else is going to help us. Maybe the government's not going to be there. Maybe the government won't like you very much. And I think the best thing that you can possibly do is to create kind of an interconnected network of people who are committed to helping each other. And that's what I mean by a tribe. I think that the only way to do that is to take away the we. A lot of people, Americans especially, are very conditioned to talk in terms of like we the people, and here's what we should do. And if there's an attack, we should go to war somewhere. And really, the government doesn't care what they think. The government does what it wants to anyway. So I mean, it's all kind of theater that their opinion is very important. I think that they should, when they talk about their we, one of the main ideas in the book is that they need to scale down their we to a group of people who they actually know care about their opinion. And if they don't have anyone who cares about their opinion and they're just shouting at the internet or at the television, that's a problem. And they need to go fix that.
You speak to a lot of the same sort of young men that I do. Do you think that there's I've maybe you haven't experienced this, but I've picked up a sort of profound loneliness, particularly in the generation of say, 17 to 27. Of men that seem totally alienated and lost. They see no decent role models in culture. They see nothing particularly to aspire to or hope for. Watching women kind of accelerate past them thanks to social engineering, effectively, and the lies of feminists and well-meaning journalists and idiot politicians. They've seen their place, their purpose in life and their raison d'etre sort of gradually dragged out from under them. Some of them are attracted to the kind of heroic Nietzschean, independence and heroism that you're talking about, but many of them just sort of feel hopelessly lost. Have you experienced that? And what's your advice to men like that? Because we're not just talking about you'll say something like this, trying to be sort of sensitive and compassionate and real, and feminists, in their infinite and boundless sociopathy, will come back and say, lonely basement dwelling neckbeards who gives a toss, who cares, good riddance. If you talk, for instance, about men kind of running away from the institution of marriage, they'll be like, well, fine, who cares? These sort of nasty sociopathic lesbianic feminists will do this from time to time, but I care. And I think we should all care about men who feel this way. And by the way, it isn't just your stereotypical, marginalized, autistic young guy. There are handsome, athletic, successful, smart men who are similarly just so completely alienated and bewildered and lost. And I think maybe you have a different view on this, but it seems to me sort of 17 to 25 is kind of the sweet spot for this. And some of these young men just feel so hopelessly lost. It can be difficult to know what to do for them. You've encountered that too, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the saddest stories in the world. I mean, you have the age that everybody has all this great potential, and the doors are kind of closed for them. I mean, one of the things that feminism did was that it says men aren't supposed to have a role. I mean, the idea is the eradication of gender roles so that sense of purpose that comes with having a role is gone. In terms of, as far as running away from traditional marriage, they know that marriage is kind of a trap for them in many cases. They could fall in love with a woman or whatever, but, they know that she can make a phone call and end everything. And, she can end everything, have her kids taken away. Everything that he sacrifices for, a woman can erase in a heartbeat. And they know that. They're not stupid. A lot of them have already seen their fathers get divorced and go through all this kind of stuff. And, as far as, in terms of jobs, there aren't a lot of jobs that aren't just mindless phone answering and email answering and so forth. And, a lot of the jobs that gave men a sense of purpose, having some kind of skill that made them valuable, those jobs are in many cases very difficult to get unless you, are part of, in America, unless your parents are in a union already and you can kind of get grandfathered in. But, and those jobs are being sent overseas. So instead they're being left with these kind of, managerial class jobs, which in many ways women are better at.
Because they tend to be about negotiation and communication and coordination.
Absolutely.
Which are not things that men take as much joy in doing.
Yeah, they're just their skills. They have these natural skills that just aren't getting used, and so the only things that they're available to them are things that they are not as good at as women. Whereas the things that they are better at, the women, those roles are gone, and so of course they're hopeless. And so all they have to do is to kind of retreat into like kind of porn and video games and all that kind of stuff, and where they get to play out those roles that they're not allowed to take in real life.
Yeah, it certainly seems true. To what extent do you think that's a product of economic factors, and to what extent is it social? I mean, certainly much of it feels like it's driven by feminism, but some of it also, of course, is just technology. It's just technology. It's it's the world turning into software. It is that middle, those sort of doctor, lawyer professions being disintermediated by software. I mean, who's to blame for all this? Really, is it Silicon Valley, or is it feminists, or is it sort of 50-50?
It's both. I mean, it's not. I mean, technology has been undermining men's roles for a couple hundred years, if not since the beginning of time. Really, every time they invent something that is more efficient, 10 guys lose their job or whatever. And feminism couldn't exist without that technology. I mean, feminism absolutely relies on freely available birth control. Feminism doesn't exist without that. And which I'd love to say is feminist because it makes their heads explode. But men don't have where to go. And in terms of jobs and economic things, it's one hand washes the other. I mean, obviously, who's in charge of hiring them? Well, the female, probably feminist human resources person. The feminism and the corporate life are actually intermixed, which is funny because if you hear, the far, far left talk, you'd think that they're incompatible. But I think that the corporations and feminism are kind of walking hand in hand now.
That's very interesting. I think you're probably right about that. If people want to pick up this book, where is it going to be available?
It should be available on Amazon now. They're getting their stock kind of figured out, but it's available to order now. I just got through shipping a lot of signed copies. I'm happy to be done with that. I'm tired of signing my name for a little bit. But
it gets tiring, doesn't it?
It's a good problem to have.
Well, it is. It is. I've developed this signature myself now. It's sort of like it's this sort of weird, oversimplified horror show of a thing. But even after 50 of them, it gets a bit much. If people want to find out more about you and read more of your things, where should we direct them?
Well, I'm very Google friendly. My website is jack-donovan.com. And there's some basic essays that I've written that I'm happy with that you can get to on that site, and I really like Instagram. That's kind of my.
Oh, you do? I don't follow you on Instagram. What a horrible failure! You're such a strapping man. What's your Instagram? I'm going to do it now.
Start the World.
Start the World. Excellent. Fine. Well, I'm going to follow you.
Yeah. No, I'm following you. I think. Yeah. Instagram. I
like. You've shamed me. You've followed me. There must be a word. What's the word for that awkward social moment when you would imagine that one person would be a slavish follower of the other, and actually the follower direction goes the other way? We'll have to come up with an expression for that.
I don't think slavish.
That was a compliment to you, wrapped in British awkwardness. I'm going to look it up. I'm going to look it up, and I'm going to rectify the situation. All right, so it's jack-donovan.com. The new book, Becoming a Barbarian, which just for the title alone, I'm going to make sure I send copies to all my boyfriends. And thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. It's been a fascinating conversation, and we will, I'm sure, hear much more from you in the future. Thanks so much, Jack Donovan.
All right, thank you.
You've been listening to the Milo Yiannopoulos Show, the podcast that launched 1,000 therapy sessions for triggered snowflakes. Thanks for tuning in, and please do subscribe on iTunes, leave us a comment, a rating, whatever you like. Our producer is Tom Sikotta. Our researchers are Will Ross and Michael Poole. Our resident German, Mark Geppert, ensures the trains run on time. And our sound engineer, John Fitch, can be found at sturbridgesound.com. Download new episodes of the Milo Yiannopoulos Show at podcast1.com, and you can also listen to us at Breitbart.
Stay tuned for 60-second AP News headlines.